Welcome to Sober Solutions. We are a weekly recovery podcast not affiliated with any particular 12-step or recovery program. However, you may hear us mention them. My name is Jason, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Chris, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Ben. I'm an alcoholic and addict.
And welcome back to Sober Solutions Podcast. Tonight is episode 39. And before we start, I just want to say happy 2022, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful holiday season and a happy New Year celebration. So tonight we're going to be talking about the shoulda, coulda, woulda, the what ifs, the regret, talking about living in the past. And for me, getting a case of those what ifs in recovery is really about me being stuck in the past. So, Chris, why don't you get us kicked off tonight?
Yeah, I think we had this topic because last episode we were talking about how we shouldn't talk about the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and after the episode we were actually just going on and on about, different scenarios about what ifs. I definitely think about it. I also think it restricts your progress if you think about it too much. There is nothing we can do to go back in time. There's a difference between learning and reflecting and ruminating on the past and, saying, oh, if I did this, if XYZ happened, then I'd be here, because really that just sets you back. We've had a bunch of people get sober, and we've watched people, even on this episode, Quint, he's been sober for many years. And some people, like one of our guests, Alan, he got sober at 50. For him, he can't sit there and say, well, I should have got sober at 20. But he did, he got sober, and that's an amazing thing. Myself, I've been going at this for 5 years, and I'm sure that my life would be a lot different right now. But really, if I sit back and I reflect, it doesn't have any positive outcomes reflecting on, thinking about that past.
So, what are some of the what ifs that you still have in recovery? I know when I'm thinking about that, it's like, what if I got sober back when I first started this journey? I was thinking about this recently when I would see friends from New York having 8, 9, 10 years of continuous sobriety. And it would just throw me into that. What if that happened for me when it was supposed to? Do you have any other of those regrets in your life as it relates to recovery?
I think I'd be lying if I said I don't regret not getting sober the first time. If I got sober the first time, I'd be better off financially. If I got sober up the first time, my marriage would be in a much better state than it is. And if I got sober the first time, I'd be celebrating 5 or 6 years. I'd be, in a much more stable mental state, I would say, hopefully. Um, I really, really try not to sit and think about that all the time. I think the biggest regret that I have is, and it's hard to even say it's a regret, because when I went to rehab the first time, I just wasn't ready to do it. And although I do wish I was ready, I was just not ready. So sitting back right now, I'm almost forcing myself to regret not being ready. So I think it's hard for me, but to answer your question, it really revolves around relationships and finances. And even more so, if I dig deeper around just the person that I become in this last year, it would be amazing to see how much I've grown in 5 years.
So, what are some of the things that you do to get unstuck from that place of feeling those what ifs or that regret?
I talk to people, try to stay present. I think that's the biggest thing I do is, you know, if I sit there with my own thoughts, my mind can go in a million different places. when that starts happening, I usually call people. That you actually start, usually happens when I'm driving. And that's when I call people constantly. So, I rotate with you guys. I have a list of probably 20 other people in the sober community that I call, and just staying present and even just listening to their lives, it really keeps me out of that mental state.
So Ben, how about you? Do you have any what ifs or regrets?
Um, no, none at all. This has been perfect, and everything's gone just the way I planned. Insert some sort of sarcastic emoji here. Um, you know, when you opened up, I was kind of, I wasn't thrown off, but I was like, doesn't this fly in the face of, I mean, Jason, I've heard you say this 1,000 times. It took every drink and every, drug that it took to get here. So, when, and there have been, every room that you've been in, you hear somebody going, I wish I got it then. I wish I got it then. I wish I got it then. So I kind of, you know, I, if we're being honest, like, I appreciate what Chris said, that you, it's kind of hard to not have regrets, right? It's funny. I do have regrets, but I don't, because I don't know if getting it like early on, like when my ex-wife like called me out like 2 years into my drinking, I don't know if I had gotten it then. Like I don't know if I would have turned to the rooms. I don't know if I would have. No, I know I wouldn't have turned to the rooms, because I still would have been in that state of like, I can control this, like I've got a handle on this. So like it really goes to that, like I needed to hit a rock bottom where I had to turn to someone, something else, something bigger than myself. Um, so the what ifs are they're a dangerous thing. The what ifs are a very dangerous thing. If if I spend a lot of time, like, to echo Chris's point, if I spend a lot of time in my head, I could really just lose myself in a lot of thought, which is not a very good thing if I'm not, thinking on a in if I don't if I'm not in the right frame of mind. So there's a, you know that's it's just kind of a, aimless, just rambling, incessant, just, oh, it's a dark place. It's a dark place when you're letting your mind wander and you don't really have a direction to go. And that's really where like what ifs and regrets, um, you know, come into play for me, like in terms of finding recovery.
Well, I think you said two important things. Being up in our head is, as I've heard in the rooms, is the most dangerous neighborhood for us as alcoholics and addicts. Because when we're stuck up there, we're not living out here in the real world. We're always constantly in our thoughts, and that's either, in the past, in the future, or, just stuck, really stuck. And the other thing you said was, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened if. And I think that's a really important point, because we just don't know. It's as clear as that. And I know when I think about, the past, the next thing that I think of is I can't change it. So what does it matter? You know? But what do you do to get unstuck from those what ifs, or living in that regret?
A lot of therapy. Therapy is just um, it's just that, like, probably the most important thing overall. And there's definitely a balance, um, between the rooms and your network and therapy, and and so for me, to make sure that I don't get stuck, I make sure that I have enough outlets where I can talk to certain people, because there's a lot going on up here. There's a whole mess of shit going on between my ears. And if it has to do with a drink, or it has to do with living living the right way and doing the next right thing, I can take that to the room. If it's a personal struggle, I can take that to the network. If it's a overall behavioral change, the thing that I want to, I can identify, and or if I don't identify, I can work with somebody who can help me identify it, and then change that behavior. That's really the thing that helps me not get stuck, because it's really simple to, I think we're gonna belabor this point, but our own thinking got us in this spot. So there's no reason for me to believe that my own thinking could get me out of the spot.
So, do you think that if you could go back and tell yourself something when you were younger, I mean, it's not realistic, it's not possible. What would that be? What would you tell your younger self?
Oh man, tell my younger self. When I think of my younger self, I don't think of my younger self at 26 when I started drinking, or 24 when I got married, or even like, you know, 18, 19 when I was screwing around in community college. I would go back to that 8-year old kid and just tell him, you don't have to be afraid. Like, you don't have to be afraid of the world, of your surroundings, of people, because that's really what drove that. Fear is just the cornerstone of my deficiencies. It fear of consequences, fear of disappointing people, fear fear of reality and the truth, um, fear of rejection. All of these things motivated me in one way or another, and it started when I was a young kid, um, and it still happens to this day. And so, I mean, I literally got off a call with my therapist at 7:30, and we were talking about this. Like, you know, there's just a lot more room to love yourself than you give it credit than you might know. And I don't know if that's because I don't know what loving myself is, or if I haven't let go of my past, or what it is. But it's a lot easier to focus on other people, because if I'm focusing on other people, then I don't have to worry about my hangups, my deficiencies, my fear. I can just focus on other people, and that's where I'll spend my emotional capital. Um, because the thing is that if I identify fear, if I identify something that I don't like about myself, then I feel there is also that need to fix things. I think that's like a human thing. I don't think that's a personality thing. Like, if you see something wrong, there's, I think, more oftentimes than not, a desire to fix it or change it or to make it better. But if you're talking about something within yourself, the other side of your head's going, "Holy shit, that's a lot of work, man. You know how long we're gonna have to work to do that, and the amount of thinking and talking and feeling and expressing and emoting, and that's too much work." But yeah, if I could go back, I would go tell the 8-year-old kid, you know, in in grade school, that you don't have to be afraid, dude.
I think that's very relatable. Very, very relatable. And along the same lines, I think I would tell my younger self, don't be afraid to be your authentic self. Because I spent so much of my life trying to people please and fit in, and what that created was this fake persona of who Jason was. And so it took me a long time to find out who my real authentic self was. And now I get to live in that, and my life is so much better, coupled with sobriety. But to have to hide myself or not be my true authentic self was probably the hardest thing for me.
Do you find yourself like having, you know, been in that protective state, if you will? If you do you find that like having to try to shoehorn yourself into this narrative or this mold, you know, do you find that like that stays with you? Because I keep having these like this just this idea of like reverting. I feel like I revert back to my old behaviors because that's where I was comfortable. Like that's where like that those were my formative years, and like even though like it wasn't the greatest, it still like got me through. And so like and especially for for you, like especially you know being closeted for however long you had been closeted, and like do you find yourself like trying to just or not, do you find yourself trying to, but do you see those tendencies still pop up?
Sometimes, because you're right, it is that comfortable space. And it's easier for me to fit into the crowd that I'm with than to not. Um, but what I'm noticing is that I catch myself a lot faster. And I'm like, that's not who you are anymore. And I get to go back to being who I really am. And it's not just about being gay or anything like that. It's really any aspect of my life. The other thing that I notice is that I am like either 0 or 60. It's either reverting back to that comfortable style or fuck everybody and everything, and I'm gonna be who I am, how I want to be, and I don't give a goddamn about what you think. And that's not good either. Because I'm you know pushing it as opposed to being authentic. So in either case, it's not who I authentically am, but really just another persona that I put on.
I really like that question. Jason, before I even answer, what would you tell your former self?
Well, I think I said it earlier. I would tell myself not to be afraid to be authentic. Not always try and fit in with the crowd or try to please the person that I'm with, or just give away a piece of myself so that I have some sort of connection, because I'm not everybody's type, I'm not everybody's favorite person, and that's okay. But what I was trying so hard to be was that I was trying to be everybody's type and everybody's friend and everybody's this and everybody's that, and I was deteriorating inside. And it took me a lot of work through recovery. First I had to get sober to find myself, but then it took me a lot of work to, dust off all of those years of shame and guilt and regret and false personas, and this is what you should be and this is what you could have been, and all of that kind of stuff to find who I am today. So I think my message to myself would be, it's okay to be you.
Yeah, Ben talked about fear being, the cornerstone of really all our personalities, and I definitely agree with that. I can relate to that, as you both said. My fears might be a little different than yours, but that definitely was the cornerstone a lot of me becoming this kind of like you said, a chameleon. I would mold to the crowds that I was with. And you guys both said it, but I would as well tell my former self to be authentic, um, don't be fake, chase your passions. Because I think through my life, with those fears, started chasing passions that weren't truly mine, whether it was financially based or just to be cool or to whatever. I mean, I remember I used to love playing the trumpet. I was in a jazz band and I gave it up.
Really?
Yeah, and I gave it up because I was playing sports and you had to be in the marching band in order to be in jazz band, and I was like, I will not be seen in that outfit because I'll get made fun of. I just remember this like vividly. And I even tried going to the principal, like going around it. Didn't matter. So I gave it up, never played again. And like those are the things that I would change. So, when you guys were talking about being authentic and chasing your passions and not being fake, I was definitely relating to that.
So, Chris, that actually ties perfectly into the next question that I had for you guys is, what are you still holding on to? That's obviously a memory of yours that you're still holding on to. But is there anything else that you're still holding on to from the past that either you can't let go or you won't let go? I think there's some of the things in my current present moment that I'm afraid to let go of because I feel like it's going to diminish me in some way. Is there anything like that for you?
I had a lot of really close friends, and through recovery, I learned that a lot of our friendships were based around drinking, or, I mean, I don't even want to say drugging, but towards the end it was that. But we started really developing friendships around drinking and partying and being down the shore. But I really don't want to say, oh, those weren't true friendships, because that just diminishes like 15 years of my life. And I really do care about those people, and it's okay to still care about them, but they're also not in my life right now. It's really hard for me because I went from in high school and college to having this giant group of friends. Like my wedding party was 13 people. It was huge. I had multiple best men. Like at the time, I just couldn't even pick a best man. And now I think I talked to two of them, and one of them is my cousin. And that was because of what I went through. It's because of multiple stints at rehab. It's through using. It's through, you know, a couple of them reached out during the first time at rehab. I still hung out. Obviously, I wasn't drinking. So, these friendships started to fade, and I wasn't drugging. So these friendships started to fade. And now it's just a completely different group of friends, which I would say are more based around my current lifestyle. So that's definitely something I hold on to. It really stings a little that I don't see some of my old best friends, but it's hard to kind of let go of that and just not think about it.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. I don't think I talk about this a lot, but I've mentioned it on the show, and you guys know this. I'm adopted, and one of the things that has been hard for me is letting go of relationships, whether that be romantic relationships, whether that be friendships, because still somewhere in the back of my mind is if you let this person go, you're going to be alone. And I think that has something to do with my adoption. I still have this front of, I did grow up in a very privileged household. I'm very loved by my father. I was very loved by my mother. I never wanted for anything. And yet I still cling to other people because I have this fear that if they leave, they'll never come back. And it's completely subconscious because I was an infant when I was adopted. And so, it's not something that I actively think about, but when we have conversations like this, that's one of the first thoughts that I have is my attachment and even, to a degree codependence a byproduct of my adoption. It's definitely something that, in this new year I'm going to really explore, because I think it's an area that I just haven't, in my recovery. I tried to do it when I was still actively using, and inevitably it would get too tough and I'd run back to a bottle or a bag. And now that I have time under my belt enough to still be young in my recovery, but mature enough in being able to take those difficult steps, I think that this is finally something that I'm ready to face. Ben, how about you? Is there anything that you're still holding on, or just won't let go?
Oh God, how much more time do we have? Um, you know, it ties back into that fear of, you know, just like, am I good enough? You know, why am I not good enough? You know, like that's a really big thing for me. Why wasn't I good enough to not, you know, get picked last in gym class? Why wasn't I good enough to, you know, understand, school and the importance of grades and all that shit? Um, you know, why wasn't I good enough to figure out my marriage? Yeah, it's just it's I don't want to say self-loathing's not the right word, but the it's just this idea of how, Jason, you're saying your fear was of relationships and people going away. I never experienced that type of disconnect or loss that you have, but my fear is that I'm just not going to be good enough, you know? And even the stuff that I really wanted to do, I really wanted to be a dad. Um, and I got the chance with my two daughters, and wasn't even good enough to stay in that, you know? And so yeah, it's just this, you know, it's this very difficult, I guess it is self-loathing, because it's just, at what point um at what point will it be good enough? And I feel like that's kind of this, um you know what, and that really is the cornerstone of what I'm holding on to. I'm holding on to what everybody else thinks, what everybody else feels, and how everybody else reacts, and it's a very difficult thing to be consumed by that, because it's a need for validation. Like, I just want to be liked. I just want people to not be upset with me. I just want people to, not look at me and go, what the hell is that guy doing?
I think it's more real quick. I think it's more what you think everyone thinks. It's not
Right.
really what everyone thinks because you just
Right.
said,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's me projecting that out into the world and projecting that on other people. And like Jason, you were saying that 0 to 60, which, by the way, your speedometer only goes to 60. You really are old.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true.
Like 100 or 120, that'd be a really out of control speedometer. But
I'm a
60.
crystal meth addict. It definitely hit 120 at one point.
but but yeah, no, it's that same thing where I'm not, like, I'm projecting the very worst case scenario of people's thoughts of me, and it's because I've just got this inner, like, idea that I'm just not really, I'm not up to people's standards for some reason. And that's one of the things, tying back into what we were talking about before about how you not get stuck. Like, that's one of the things that I brought to my therapist today. And we've been working on it for a couple of weeks, and she's just kind of impressed upon me, like, there needs to be this self appreciation, because if everybody else in the world was happy around me, what would would that truly make me happy? And the answer is no, because then I would just look around at a bunch of people that are happy and go, geez, I wish I had what they had. So you
So do you do
that
that in recovery? Do you see people around you that have either less time, same time, more time, that are happy? Because this is very enlightening for me, because I didn't know that you still struggle with this, or I guess one of my questions is like, are you hanging on to this for a reason? Or is it just something that's sitting with you? But do you see other people in recovery that are that happy that you were just describing, and compare yourself to that, or like, I you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that definitely knocks me down is when we get on these podcasts and you tell me that my hair is never going to be as nice as yours. That's just
Never been,
right.
sorry.
That's just so once a week I'm just guaranteed to be crushed back into the ground.
Keeping your ego in check.
You know what's funny when you bring up other people in recovery, like I look at guys that like have 25, 30, 35 years and they struggle and share the same things that we talk about here and what we've talked about in rehab. So like it's funny because like yeah, like even getting time wouldn't make me happy. Like it really is like the people that I see in recovery that are the happiest are people that are content with themselves. They're just they love everything that they have going on and they appreciate the moment and they can stay completely present and those are the things that I need to focus on. But that's a great question. I had not really thought of it in those terms, but yeah.
I think the first thing was more of the grass is always greener. You talked about the people with 25 years, 30 years sharing about the same things and sharing their struggles. I think that's more the reality. And when you're talking about how some people are always happy and this and life's perfect, I think that's them not being honest. If you're sitting there every day, saying how everything's perfect, especially in an AA meeting,
Yeah.
you're kind of full of shit,
Well, there's
right?
no such thing as perfect, so you're
Right.
absolutely right.
It's like Instagram, right? Like if you go on Instagram and feel bad about yourself, you need a reality check because
Yeah.
Instagram is not reality. And I know we talked about this once and I don't want to go to deep dive of social media, but it's life is like that too, right? And I think we have to learn something from the 25, 30-year-old person that is sober for that long that shares about their struggles because guess what? Them sharing that for 25, 30 years keeps them sober.
Yeah, and on the flip side to that is the individual who has 60 days sober and is just, full of life and able to share their struggle, and that conscious mind of being in the present day. I think there's a lot of learning that both the old timer and the newcomer can give each other in terms of recovery.
Do you this is gonna sound weird. Do you miss that early recovery?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do I miss that early
100%.
recovery?
I'm
I
so I'm so conflicted by it because I miss being on the pink cloud. I really do. I miss when everything was just unbelievably eye-opening and refreshing. And to your point, the person with 60 days where they can come in, and I understand why the newcomer is the most important person in the room. I didn't understand it when people say that about me or us, and now I get it because they are a shot of light. They are like you physically watch the fog get lifted from them, and it's really that next part. If when you asked before, what would you tell your younger self? What I would tell myself of like 9 months ago was that like when this pink cloud goes away, it's not going to be nearly as bad as you think. It's not going to be as great as you think. Like it's not going to stay as good, but it's not going to be nearly as bad as you think.
I agree with that. I think that's anytime you start something new, right? You start a journey in recovery, you start a new job, you start a new relationship. Everything has a honeymoon phase. And on the flip side to that, I think that every day can have a shot of life. I try to do that. And I do that through a gratitude list. I know that every morning before I get out of bed, I am listing at least 10 things that I'm grateful for from the previous day. And so after I get out of bed, I am searching for things to be grateful for and to be happy about. And I look for that shot of life because that's what I'm choosing in my day to day. You know, I'm looking to be that. Perfect example is today. Today has been just a tough day. I've been working since 7 o'clock this morning. I just finished at 8:30, I think, right before we got on here. Some things didn't go my way. Traffic was bad. The car had low tire pressure because of the change in the weather, but I was able to find that joy, and that's what I actively look for. I look for those joys in my life, which bring me back to that pink cloud feeling. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's never going to be like that again. And if I'm honest, it was never like that when I was first getting sober because I had so many questions. I still wasn't feeling great, and it wasn't as good even back then. But I consciously look to keep that positive attitude um, in my day to keep me going, and it's authentic too. It's not like this fake it till I make it kind of stuff anymore. Because there were days like I had like that in early recovery, and now it's real authentic joy, and I get to experience things better. I get to experience joy at a new level. I get to experience pain and anger at a different level. I get to experience things in a totally new way being sober.
Yeah, the beginning of sobriety, I do miss it. I could wholeheartedly say I do. And I think it's because of exactly what you're saying. You go through this honeymoon phase, and when in my early sobriety, the 3 or 4 times that I had it, you learn so much. You're so engaged, or I was engaged. In my life revolved around that. Fast forward, 6 months, 8 months, a year of sobriety, life happens, and not that your priorities change, because I think just new priorities emerge that equal the other ones. So, whereas in the beginning, I would spend 6 hours in IOP a day. And prior to that, I was making a gratitude list. And prior to that, I was reading and doing yoga. So my whole day revolved around recovery. And it's very easy to be enlightened when your whole day is around recovery.
Yeah, but when you were sitting in IOP for 6 hours, were you on a pink cloud? Were you happy those 6 hours?
I honestly loved IOP. I had such a good therapist. And honestly, my I would say 80% of my support system is from that class of people. We were the quote unquote later class, and they were people that I'm friends with today. I'm going to dinner with one of them next week. I just talked to one of them for about 2 hours before this podcast. I am very close with those guys. I would say equally as close as I am with you guys. So
So when you had that before, is it because those things like hanging out with those guys, focusing on your recovery, doing yoga, going to the gym, did those become less important to you? Did you deprioritize that so that other things could come into your life? And do you think that your life would change back to that if you put those things back into it?
a good exercise our therapist made us do was we had I think it was like 20 ping pong balls, and then we had 10 buckets, And I know I've said this before in the past, but you put the ping pong balls in whatever your priorities are. You know, one of the buckets is like family, one of them is relationships, one is your work, one is your social life, yada yada yada. And I think everyone during this exercise had one ping pong ball in recovery. You know, the end goal was you need recovery for all the other things, but I think your priorities just change. And it's because of recovery, because of my sobriety, I am able to be a better father. I am able to keep a job. But, and I know there's the excuse of I don't have time, but I only have certain amount of time a day, and right now my life doesn't have enough time to go to the gym, to do yoga, to read, it doesn't have enough time for that, and to be a father, and to help my wife, and to cook, and to have a job. So would I love to be able to do yoga, go to the gym, do all that? 100%. And I think I would truly be happy, but I think the things around me would start to fall apart in other ways.
Ben, how about you? You talked about losing that pink cloud sensation. What is it that you could put back into your life that would get you back into that feeling that you had before?
The ignorance of not knowing that life really isn't all about me. I mean, like, you know, when speaking for myself specifically, um, I was fortunate enough to go to rehab for like 2.5, 3 weeks, um, and everything was taken care of at home, and there was I was able to come back, and even though I didn't go home, I was able to you know I lived at my parents' house, and they supported me just a billion percent, and I was able to not my work wasn't affected, and I was able to Chris, like you said, like dive into all those things that we found at like rehab, or along our journey of recovery, of like just enlightenment, reading as much as possible, and and just kind of getting this mindset of like just this new outlook on life. um and so for me, yeah, I think that you know it's yeah, I definitely I hear what you're saying, Chris, that there's only so much time in the day. I feel like I know I could do a better job of prioritizing it. um and I just wish that I wish that I prioritized working out again, and meditating, and reading as much as possible. Even you know I still hit my morning meeting every day. I don't share the way I used to, um because it's I probably because I overthink it. um but yeah, but early on I thought that because it was this big revelation to me, it was like, oh wow, let me share this experience with everybody. And I come to find out that this is just another normal experience in sobriety and recovery, of just like you know finding finding that there is a easier way to deal with your issues, and not drown them out. But yeah, I mean, as much as I do enjoy looking back on those times, I don't miss um, the roller coaster of emotions. It's a whole lot nicer, when we're on this ride, and you pass an emotion, I can see it, and I can experience it, and I can take it for what it is, and then I can you know move along. Which, yeah, it doesn't have a pink cloud, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm glad it happened, but I definitely don't miss the reason that I was there. So I think that's where I fall. It was definitely a necessity in my life at the time, and I'm thankful that I met the people I met and I experienced what I experienced, but I hope I don't go back.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. And I think that life is all about choices, and we get to choose how we live today. And that determines how quickly we can move away from our past and being able to drop the rock and really let go of those things that are holding us back. Well, great episode tonight, guys. It's good to see you after the new year. And as always, each and every single of our episodes is dedicated to the still sick and suffering addict and alcoholic, especially the individual who's going to pick up for the first time tonight. Have a great night, guys.
Have a great night.
Have a great night.
We appreciate your liking and subscribing to our podcast. If you liked what you heard today and would like to support our podcast, feel free to Venmo $1 to our virtual basket at Sober Solutions Podcast. We want to hear from you too. If you have a comment, question, topic, or would like to come on the show, find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Sober Solutions Podcast. Or you can shoot us an email to sobersolutionspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And if you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show.